Imagine you are 15 years old. You walk into a hospital. The doctors tell your parents you have appendicitis. They say it is routine. They say, you will be fine. But when you wake up, something has changed inside you forever, and no one asked for your permission. No one explained what was done. You will only find out years later what the doctors actually took from you that day. This is not a scene from a dystopian novel. This happened. It happened in the United States of America, within living memory, to thousands of Native American women and girls. And that is just one of the 9 brutal, astonishing, and deeply human stories we are cracking open today. Welcome to Frontier Uncensored. I am your host, Dustin, and if you are new here, this is the place where we pull back the curtain on the chapters of American history that most textbooks would rather skip. Subscribe and hit that bell, because we go places the mainstream does not. Today we are talking about 9 facts about Native American tribes that will shift how you see this continent and the people who called it home long before anyone else did. Stay with me through every single one, because the final story we tell today may be the most quietly revolutionary of them all. Let us get into it. Picture the Great Plains in 1965. The civil rights movement is on television every night. The nation is patting itself on the back for progress. And somewhere in a federal clinic on a reservation, a young Native American woman is signing a document she does not fully understand, written in a language she was never properly taught, giving consent for a procedure she cannot entirely comprehend. She trusts the doctors. She trusts the government. That trust will cost her everything. Beginning in the early 1960s and continuing well into the 1970s, thousands of Native American women across the United States were subjected to forced or coercive sterilization. The program was not carried out in secret back alleys. It was done in government-funded hospitals by licensed medical professionals, under the umbrella of a policy rooted in eugenics, the pseudoscientific belief that certain populations could be improved, or rather, reduced, through selective reproduction. The estimates are staggering. Between 25 and 42% of all Indigenous women of childbearing age underwent sterilization procedures during this era. To put that in perspective, researchers later estimated that in some communities, as many as 1 in 3 women was permanently sterilized. In many cases, consent forms were presented during labor, when women were in tremendous pain and in no position to fully process what they were signing. In other cases, consent was bypassed entirely. The 15-year-old girl I described at the start of this video, she is not a composite. Cases exactly like hers are documented in congressional testimony from 1974. Young girls admitted for routine appendectomies, waking up without their reproductive capacity, never told, never asked. Now here is the thing I want you to sit with for a moment. The United States government did not formally acknowledge the full extent of this program for decades. Advocacy groups and survivors fought for years to bring this into public consciousness. So my question to you is this. If this happened within the lifetime of people still living today, what else have we quietly agreed to forget? Because that question is going to follow us through every fact in this video. Let us travel back further, back to the Cherokee Nation in the early 1800s. And let us talk about a man named Sequoya, because his story is, without exaggeration, one of the most remarkable intellectual achievements in recorded American history. Sequoya was born around 1770 in present-day Tennessee. He was a silversmith by trade. He had no formal education. He could not read or write in any language. But he had watched Europeans communicate with each other through marks on paper, and something about that fascinated him. He thought, if they can do it, why can we not? Here is your first open loop for this video. Sequoya spent 12 years on a project that the people around him called witchcraft. 12 years on something his own community wanted to burn. And at the end of those 12 years, he changed his nation forever. But the road to that moment almost destroyed him. We will get to exactly what happened. But first, understand the scale of what he was attempting. Sequoya was not simply translating Cherokee into English letters. He built a writing system from scratch, from nothing. He experimented, failed, revised, and experimented again, developing characters that represented the syllables of the spoken Cherokee language rather than individual sounds. After more than a decade of work, he completed a syllabary of 85 characters, every syllable in the Cherokee language, captured in a visual symbol, invented by one man, with no prior exposure to formal linguistics, no academic institution behind him, no government grant. When he began teaching his daughter Ioka, word spread, and the reaction was not celebration. It was suspicion. People accused him of practicing witchcraft. He and his daughter were separated. Tribal leaders intervened, ordering a test. Father and daughter would exchange written messages from isolation. If the system worked, they would know it was real. The warriors watched. The messages passed. The system worked. And within months, thousands of Cherokee people were learning to read and write in their own language. By 1825, the Cherokee syllabary was officially adopted by the Cherokee Nation. By 1828, with the help of a printing press and a Christian missionary named Samuel Worcester, the Cherokee Phoenix was rolling off presses, the first bilingual newspaper in United States history, printed in both English and Cherokee. One man, no schooling, 12 years, a written language for an entire people. That is Sequoya, and his alphabet is still in use today. Now, I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever stood at the base of something tall, something ancient, and felt the weight of all the meaning carved into it? Because if you ever find yourself in the Pacific Northwest, you need to stand before a totem pole, really stand before one, and let it teach you. Totem poles are most commonly associated with tribes like the Haida, the Tlingit, and the Kwakwaka'wakw. They are not decorations. They are not the primitive art that early colonial observers dismissed them as. They are libraries. They are genealogies. They are legal documents and spiritual records, standing between 15 and over 20 meters tall, carved from single cedar logs with a level of technical precision that still draws admiration from structural engineers today. Each figure on the pole tells part of a story. Close quote. The eagle, carved near the top, represents divine intelligence and freedom. The bear, with its broad shoulders and open paws, carries the meaning of strength and raw instinct. The wolf represents loyalty and the sharp mind of a predator who works within a pack. The frog, quieter and lower on the pole, symbolizes cleansing, peace, and the ability to adapt to whatever comes next. These were not random choices. Every figure was deliberate, placed by carvers who understood exactly what they were building and why. A totem pole could document a clan's lineage, commemorate a great event, or mark the passing of a respected leader. They were read by people who knew the visual language, just as we read a page. And here is what gets me every time I think about this. Contemporary totem pole carvers are still working today, still using hand tools, still honoring the traditional techniques. The art did not die. It endured. All right, let us talk about the most important code ever cracked in American military history. Or rather, the one that was never cracked, because the enemy never came close. By 1942, the United States was deep in the Pacific War, and the military had a problem. Standard radio communication was vulnerable. Codes were being broken. Enemy intelligence was intercepting transmissions and using that information to anticipate American movements. Lives were being lost because secrets could not stay secret. The solution came from an unexpected place. A civil engineer named Philip Johnston, who had grown up on a Navajo reservation as the son of a missionary, approached the Marine Corps with an idea. Use the Navajo language as the basis for a communication code. It was a language with no written form at the time, spoken by fewer than 30 people outside the Navajo Nation, who were not Navajo themselves, and characterized by tonal complexity and grammatical structures so different from European languages that it was essentially impenetrable to outside analysis. The Marine Corps approved the experiment. The first 29 Navajo recruits were selected, sent to boot camp, and tasked with developing the code. They built a system in which Navajo words were assigned to represent military terms. The Navajo word for turtle meant tank. The word for iron fish meant submarine. Specific letters of the alphabet were encoded using Navajo words for animals whose English names started with those letters. In combat, the code talkers could encode, transmit, and decode a 3-line message in 20 seconds. The same message through the standard mechanical encryption system took 30 minutes. 20 seconds versus 30 minutes. In the middle of a firefight, that gap is the difference between life and catastrophe. The code talkers served in every major marine operation in the Pacific Theater from 1942 to 1945. Major Howard Connor, signal officer at the Battle of Iwo Jima, was direct about what he witnessed. He said that without the Navajo code talkers, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. And yet, after the war, these men came home to a country that still did not allow many Native Americans to vote. Their service was classified until 1968. They could not talk about what they had done. They could not explain to their families or their communities the role they had played in winning the war. They carried that in silence for more than 2 decades. In 2001, the original 29 code talkers were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. Some of them were no longer alive to receive it. Now tell me, have you ever thought about what it means to serve a country that has taken so much from you and still show up, still fight, still carry the secret? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is the kind of thing I think people need to talk about more. Let us shift the atmosphere for a moment, because not everything in this history is shadow. Some of it is color and drumbeat and the smell of cedar smoke. The powwow. The word sounds almost playful, and in many ways the experience is joyful. But do not mistake joy for simplicity. A powwow is one of the most complex and deeply layered cultural events you can witness in North America. Powwows grew from sacred ceremonies into inclusive social gatherings that brought tribes together across distances, across dialects, across old rivalries. They became a space where culture did not just survive, but was actively celebrated, shared, and passed to the next generation. At the center of a powwow is the drum, not a metaphor. The actual drum, played by a group of singers in the middle of the arena, the heartbeat of the entire gathering. Dancers circle around it in regalia that can take years to assemble, each piece carrying meaning. The feathers, the beadwork, the colors, the fringe, each detail a living record of tribal identity, personal history, and spiritual connection. The grand entry, the opening procession that begins the dancing, carries a weight that you feel even if you do not know its significance. It is a physical act of remembrance, a reconnection with ancestral spirits, a statement that says, we are still here, and they are. That is the point. Now here is something that should stop you cold. Right now, on this continent, languages are dying. Not slowly, not quietly. They are collapsing in real time. The Administration for Native Americans has documented 245 distinct indigenous languages within the United States. Of those, 65 have already gone extinct, not declining, gone. And a further 75 are on the edge of extinction, with only a handful of fluent speakers remaining, most of them elderly. When a language dies, it does not just take words with it. It takes ways of thinking. It takes knowledge systems that exist in no other form. Botanical knowledge, astronomical observation, ecological understanding, embedded in grammatical structures and vocabulary that have no direct translation. Some of what those languages contained is simply unrecoverable once the last speaker is gone. Communities have been fighting back. Language immersion programs, started in earnest in recent decades, are placing children inside native languages from their earliest years. In 2017, the Native Language Immersion Initiative expanded these efforts significantly. The results are real, and the stakes could not be higher. Here is my question to you, and I genuinely want to know what you think. When a language disappears, who is responsible? Is it the passage of time? Is it policy? Is it something we are all complicit in when we choose convenience over preservation? Let me know in the comments. Let us talk about something that hangs in almost every bedroom, every dorm room, every bohemian apartment in America, and almost no one who owns one knows where it actually comes from. The dream catcher. The dream catcher originates in the Ojibwe tradition, a nation with deep roots in the Great Lakes region. In the Ojibwe worldview, sleep is not simply rest. It is a passage into another layer of reality, a space where both protection and wisdom can be received or lost. The design of the dream catcher is not arbitrary. The hoop, typically made from willow, represents the circle of life, the unbroken continuity of existence. The web inside echoes the spider's web, which in Ojibwe tradition symbolizes wisdom and the interconnected nature of all living things. The openings in the web allow positive, clarifying visions to pass through. The negative, the confusing, the harmful, gets caught, held in the web, until the morning light dissolves it. There is a quiet philosophy inside that design. Not everything that reaches you in the dark is worth keeping. Some things need to be filtered, held, transformed by light. The dreamcatcher has become one of the most recognizable and most commercially exploited symbols associated with Native American culture, which raises its own complicated questions about appropriation, about what it means when the sacred becomes a mass-produced commodity. But we will save that conversation for another episode. Now, the buffalo. On the Great Plains, in the early 19th century, an estimated 30 to 60 million bison roamed. They were the foundation of life for the Plains Indians, not in a poetic sense, in a strictly literal one. The meat was the primary food source, dried and prepared to last through brutal winters. The hides built the teepees, portable homes designed to be assembled and disassembled, as the tribe followed the herds across hundreds of miles of open territory. The hides also became clothing and blankets. The bones and ligaments became tools and weapons. The sinew served as thread. The fat was rendered into cooking oil and protective grease. And yes, even the bladder had its purpose. Cleaned and dried, it became a water container. Not a single part of the animal was wasted. Every kill was treated as a gift, and the spiritual relationship between the plains, peoples, and the bison was so fundamental that when the bison herds were systematically devastated in the latter half of the 19th century, it was not simply an ecological catastrophe. It was a targeted assault on an entire way of life. By 1889, fewer than 1,000 bison remained on the continent. The same animal that had sustained civilizations for thousands of years was nearly erased in the span of a few decades. And that was not an accident. Here is the open loop I want to leave you with before we get to our final fact. The story of the buffalo and the story of the people who depended on it are inseparable. And the survival of both is one of the most remarkable comeback stories in American natural and cultural history. But survival came at a cost that is still being counted. We have covered sterilization programs. We have covered a man who built a written language from nothing. We have covered codes that turned the tide of a world war. But I want to close with something that I think is the most quietly radical idea in all of Native American cultural tradition. And it is one that modern American culture is still struggling to fully understand. The concept of two-spirit. Across many Native American tribes, long before European contact, there existed a recognized category of personhood that did not fit neatly into the binary of male and female. The term two-spirit is a modern, pan-tribal term that emerged in the 1990s to create a shared language for these diverse indigenous gender identities. But the concept itself is ancient. In these traditions, two-spirit individuals were understood to carry within them a unique balance of masculine and feminine energy and perspective. This was not seen as a disorder. It was not stigmatized. In many communities, it was regarded as a gift, a spiritual designation that equipped certain people to serve their communities in ways that others could not. Two-spirit individuals held roles as visionaries, artists, healers, counselors, and matchmakers. They could go to war alongside warriors. They could also take on the domestic and caregiving responsibilities that tribal life required. They occupied a social space that allowed them to move between worlds, to see from multiple angles, and to serve as bridges between different parts of their community. When European missionaries and colonial administrators encountered two-spirit individuals, they did not try to understand. They worked to eradicate. The forced assimilation campaigns that swept through indigenous communities, the boarding schools, the religious conversions, the legal structures imposed from outside, all of them treated two-spirit identity as something to be corrected. Many communities lost the language and the practice entirely. But the knowledge survived. In the 1990s, indigenous scholars, activists, and community members began the work of recovering that knowledge. creating space for contemporary Two-Spirit people to reconnect with a tradition that colonization had tried to erase. And here is what I want to leave you with as we close this out. Every single story we have told today, the young woman who woke up in that hospital, the silversmith who built a language from nothing, the warriors who carried an unbreakable code across the Pacific, the drum that still beats at the center of the powwow, the dream catcher on your wall, the bison that fed a civilization, the languages that are racing against extinction, and the human beings who were told for centuries that their way of understanding gender and identity was wrong. Every single one of these stories points to the same truth. The survival of Native American culture is not a historical footnote. It is an ongoing act of resistance, creativity, and profound human resilience. It has been fought for in hospitals and courtrooms and classrooms and on Pacific Islands in the middle of a world war. It has been fought for in the act of a man spending 12 years alone, building a writing system, because he believed his people deserved to have one. Looking at all of that evidence, I want to ask you the same question I started with, only now, with everything you know. Do you think the story of Native America has been fully told, or have we only just begun? Let me know in the comments. I read everything down there. And if this video opens something up for you, share it. These are stories that deserve a wider audience.